In this video, I'd like to follow up on the one I just did before, Quantum Quagmire, and it will also briefly revisit one I did about a year ago called Let There Be Light Making Waves, and these are all linked in the description. And the issue is, first of all, that quantum physics states that we can neither assign a precise position nor an exact direction to a particle or quantum. Since a wave function is merely a probability distribution, it proves precisely nothing about the nature of the quanta themselves and how they behave in groups. The fundamental problem with the conclusion of the quantum eraser experiment is that picking off a particle and saying, see, it doesn't travel in waves, is like taking one molecule of water and saying water doesn't manifest as waves. Waves are a collective behavior of many linked particles of the same substance. But this hardly means that since you can shoot water under pressure from a fire hose, that the ocean will stop waving if you look at it. That's, on the surface, the absurd conclusion that quantum eraser experiments seem to draw us to. Now, we looked at it in detail in the Quantum Quagmire video. But that's essentially what it really does boil down to. Now, light and other electromagnetic radiation behaves as waves, the particles of light, until they crash into something that scatters the individual drops, just as the ocean waves crash to the shore and the water on the sand isn't waving anymore. So the quantum eraser experiment does not prove that light never travels in waves. Wavelength is a very real, measurable, predictable, and usable phenomenon. And what we have here on the screen is if you were to take the pebble labeled P there and drop, well, actually, it'd be better if they had shown two pebbles, but drop them at those two central locations, you'll get this wave interference pattern. Now, if you just drop one, you get the concentric circles without interference. And if you're standing on the shore, you will just see waves going up and down. But if you look at it from the top, you would see something like this, especially if you drop two pebbles. So you get your interference patterns, which some parts are amplified and others are suppressed. That's where you get zones of no wave and wave. You know, that's just how wave patterns are. But so if you drop the pebble into a pond, you're looking down on it here, but if you're the person standing at the edge, you will see waves coming towards you, but waves of water, not waves of pebbles. So the result we detect on the shore, waves of water, is a result of a perpendicular disturbance. That means it's at a right angle to what we're viewing. We're looking out horizontally. The disturbance happened vertically. Somebody else dropped a pebble into the water. According to one theory, where the water is analogous to ether, this could be what we detect as light, a disturbance of ether. It's like the water in this analogy rather than the pebble. The pebble could represent some cause in a realm we can't detect, much the way a two-dimensional world or observer in a two-dimensional world would not be able to imagine a 3D object. So this is the famous Flatlander image that you may have heard about. And it shows that if you're in a flatland two-dimensional realm and something three-dimensional happens, you won't know what to make of it. You will only observe, from their perspective, a circle growing on your realm, and you have no idea how it got there. I labeled these, I added things to it, supernatural and natural, because to me there are only 4 dimensions. Time is not a dimension, and space is not really a dimension, although it's defined as 3-dimensional essentially, but space itself is not a 4th dimension or anything like that. So if we are in 3 dimensions, height, width, and depth, then the 4th dimension would be the supernatural, where it interferes with our realm in ways we don't understand and can't imagine, really. So that's just the concept of ether as the stuff of the realm that is perturbed or disturbed when certain things cause disturbance, and we see the results of the disturbance of the ether, not the thing that caused it. That's all I'm trying to get across there. Any kind of wave is defined as having both amplitude and phase. Amplitude is the distance from the peak to the trough, while phase is when the cycle begins, and I will try to show that here. we have a blue wave and a red wave here to show that there's a difference in phase. The peak of this one to the peak of the red one to the peak of the blue one is the phase difference. So phase is just a set of waves. The phase difference is a set of waves that are starting at different times. The amplitude you can see here, it's 0 is the rest state where nothing's waving at all, and it can go above that resting state or below it. So we know that waves go up and down, especially if you've watched the Let There Be Light video. It's like if you hold a slinky up and let the bottom of it go and hold the top, it will bounce. The bottom part will bounce up and down, and this spring will expand and contract. That's what amplitude is. And the frequency, period, or cycle all names the same thing. You can also call it hertz, named after a guy named Hertz. All mean the same thing, and that's from the beginning, where we're just looking at the blue wave here for simplicity. The beginning of the blue wave at rest till it comes back to its original resting point, from going to one extreme amplitude to the other and then back again. That is a period, cycle, frequency, or hertz. That's 1 hertz. So that happens over time. So a wave has to involve time, it has to involve motion, and it has to involve phase. But quanta, defined as we showed in the Quantum Quagmire video, being tiny bits of things, whatever those bits are made of, is the big question. It presents a paradox as explained in this website here, if I can get my stack of images here right. This is from an EDU, so it's a valid source as far as standard science goes. And they say it's a paradox. They conclude there, if you read the article, that the, quote, the paradox lies in the use of inappropriate, imagined macroscopic pictures and does not come out of the laws of physics, end quote. This applies to both waves and particles. Neither real-world extreme is the clear winner in quantum eraser experiments. So we need to look more at the nature of quanta or particles. So let's look at this next page. And it talks about the fact that there is such a thing as a smallest possible unit of any substance before it can no longer be defined as that substance. For example, if you split a molecule of water, the parts are not water, but the elements, hydrogen and oxygen, are what you get. Those are basic elements, which, when combined in certain ways, makes a molecule of water. So the smallest bit of water, defined as water, is a molecule of hydrogen and oxygen. But you can break it apart into its elements. But though the smallest unit of light is called the photon, it can't really be divided. It is itself a fundamental element. It appears to have no mass and no net charge, which some think may be because it contains elements of equal but opposite charges. And here we can look at this article called What Are Photons? So you can look through that, and basically the idea is that, well, first we have to explain that magnetism and electricity are really two sides of the same coin. If there's motion, they are. Moving electrons will produce a magnetic field, and a magnetic field will produce moving electrons. This is how an electronic device can be charged without there being a wire connecting it to the power source. That's called induction. A magnetic field is created when electricity flows through a coil of wire in the power source, and the device being charged picks up that energy via its own coiled wire. And I will try to get my images back up here and show what induction is. Here's a wireless phone charging device. Now, if the article I got this from states that it's not the most ideal charging method because it's slower and you can't take it with you like you could a battery pack that a lot of people use if they're out a lot and they need to recharge their phone. They just plug it into their pocket-sized battery pack. That's a little more of a challenge when you have a wireless charger like that. But the point here is that induction is a real thing. It's not magic, it's magnetism. So we have a coil, they're, crudely represented here. In the phone, there's this coil of wire. Because when you move electricity through the coil of wire, you get a magnetic field. And that magnetic field is at a right angle to the direction of current. So you'll get this vertical component here, and that's picked up by this bottom corresponding coil of wire, which converts it. Actually, it's going the other way, sorry. We're starting here, this is the power source, the mat or whatever. You plug that into the wall, so whether you have a wireless or not, you've got to plug something into the wall to get some energy. So you run current through here, it makes this magnetic field, and this one picks it up and turns it back into energy with which it charges its battery. So that's how induction works. But since light has no charge, no net charge at least, how do photocells work? The best I could find out is that the kinetic energy of light as it moves is essentially knocking electrons out of their places, causing electricity to flow. Whether that's a full or accurate answer, I can't say, but we do know that photocells work. When light hits certain things, it results in free electrons, which flow electricity. So electromagnetism simply expresses the two sides of the coin, and the fact that light can be exchanged for electrons proves that it's a form of electromagnetic radiation. Like water being made of molecules of smaller elements, so also light is made of elements. But is it an element? The fact that light can be polarized is further proof of it traveling in waves, though. If a photon is a true element and can't be split, then the quantum eraser experiment is claiming the impossible by splitting photons. But if a photon is composed of equal but opposite charges, it can be split, which would explain why the two halves of a photon that is split in the quantum eraser experiment are mirror images of each other, one basically positive and the other negative. In addition, the quantum eraser experiment essentially strips off all the wave attributes of light, then claims it was never a wave in the first place. But our perception of detection of light has more to do with the material it hits rather than light's own nature or composition. So it is, in my opinion, a flawed experiment because it depends on our detection method, and that has as much to do with how light affects it than what light actually is. Every atom is a package of electromagnetism, which always must have motion within itself, and where there's motion, there's energy. But this energy follows rules and must be caused by something else, something, in my opinion, immaterial and infinite. So we'll go back to 3D world, or a 2D world, with the supernatural being the dimension they can't imagine. So there must be an immaterial cause of the material, in my opinion. This is the conclusion that any part of nature would drive you to. Energy follows rules. Who makes up rules? Nature does not make up rules. Nature follows rules. So the rules must be caused by something else, something immaterial and infinite. So our realm requires a supernatural intelligence, whether we believe light is only made of waves or particles. It doesn't matter. We don't need the quantum eraser claim that matter can't exist without a knower. Intelligent design is inescapable at any scale. It doesn't have to be just at the quantum scale. Without energy and motion, there would be no matter. So something created matter and set it all in motion, and that something had to be intelligent, since our realm is saturated with information, which requires a knower. So what I'm saying is we don't need quantum eraser seeming magic in order to explain that a knower is necessary. Information is all over the place. It's in biology, it's in the quantum realm, it's everywhere. Things follow rules. The laws of physics, they wouldn't exist without someone making the laws, and that has to be a someone because only an intelligence comes up with rules that can be encoded and decoded. There has to be intelligence on both ends. There would be no laws of physics without intelligent design. Nature only does what it does because it's programmed to do it. You can't say, well, nature organizes itself. Why does it organize itself? Because it's programmed to do it. It's designed. You can put all the stuff you want in a bucket. If there are no rules to tell it how to behave, nothing will happen. Even if matter existed without a cause, it could do nothing without instructions, and instructions come from instructors. And with that, I'm going to go back to web pages and show you one bit of scripture. If I can get this to come up, there we go. And we'll put our desired scripture in here to tie this all up. Talking about Jesus the Son, Colossians 1:14, who got us released on our failures pardon. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Everything was created by him. Everything in the heavens and on the earth, the visible and the invisible, as well as positions of power, ruled domains, and authorities. It has all been created by him and for him. He precedes everything and holds it all together. That, in my opinion, is the dimension of the supernatural that must be there for the results we examine and see and experience in our realm, in our physical realm. There can be no explanation for it except intelligent design. So then the only question for anybody thinking about all this, and if they agree with that conclusion, is, now who is the designer? What do we know about the designer? And for that is a philosophical discussion, a religious discussion. My personal opinion is all over my website, which I will put a link to in the description. And basically, it is that you can look at the effect to try to figure out something about the cause. And the effect we see is not only matter and energy, but also abstract things like love, hate, compassion or mercy or cold-bloodedness or morality. These things are not survival mechanisms because survival is inherently very, very selfish. Survival of the fittest means you don't care about the group. Even if you have the ability to understand that you can do better with them, you're still always in competition, even with people you may be using at the moment to get where you want to be. But ultimately, blind nature consumes. And it does so even sometimes to its own detriment. And there is no morality that says it's wrong to, say, club baby seals. It's all about consumption and self, and that's all. So things that we observe as effects, that is to say, we know there are such things, abstract concepts, that go against what you would think blind nature would do, then because we see those effects, then the cause must have those attributes. Therefore, I believe that the cause of everything is intelligent and compassionate. And that evil is just the absence of compassion, just the way darkness is not a thing in itself, but the absence of light. Then from that point, you look for a compassionate creator, and you would expect such a compassionate creator, being compassionate, to communicate something about that entity's attributes to us. And I believe that's been done by the fact, at the very least, that someone named Jesus really existed, even by secular standards, and rose from the dead. I'm trusting that one. That's the best I've got to go on for any sort of identity of the creator. And I, in all my years, have never seen another idea come up with something better or more concrete. So that's all I really intend to say about quantum mechanics, quantum eraser experiment, waves versus particles, and the necessity of an intelligent designer.